Your Creative Push, episode 272.
If I don't do this now, if I don't start working to reach this goal of getting in a gallery now, I'll never get there. It's now or never.
Happy New Year and welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Dave Roberts. Now, Dave is an artist who uses something that I am actually familiar with, or at least used to be when I was a kid, the Etch A Sketch. And he comes on the show today to talk about his artistic career, how he first got introduced to Etch A Sketch and how he found out that other people were actually using this thing to make art and beginning to learn from them. He talks about how he developed a method for preserving his art and then coming up with a long-term goal to be featured in a gallery, and the journey that he took in order to eventually achieve that goal. Now, like any creative journey, it wasn't always easy, and he had to overcome many obstacles, many of which were in his own head. So he shares some of his tips that he has learned along his journey, like trying not to get lost in your own negative thoughts, building up resiliency by getting knocked down and then getting back up again, and then just making that decision to achieve your goals despite the fact that all of those previous excuses are still a part of your life. It's just making the decision to go for it and then actually doing it. I had a very timely talk with Dave because he is smack dab in the middle of a great success. So this is a story with a very happy ending. And I know it's going to really inspire you to kick off your new year on the right foot. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Dave Roberts. Dave, welcome to Your Creative Push, man.
Hey, Youngman, thanks for having me.
Oh, of course, dude. You do a very unique thing, and I can't wait to kind of get into that. But could you start out by kind of giving us your creative, artistic kind of background, how you got to this point?
So I guess I hear a lot of people say it, but I've always drawn, right? So I remember as a little kid, I'd like find myself in my bedroom just by myself drawing like random little shapes and seeing what I can make out of them, and I make little characters in school. I'd like draw and I'd get these series going of these, I don't know, like comic book characters type stuff. I'd get tracing books and learn how to draw that way. The how-to drawing books at the library, like I'd go to the library and just like check out all these how-to drawing books and just learn how to draw that way. And then I get into some weird stuff. Like I had a friend in school and he liked doing art too. And we get on, this was back in the early 90s, late 80s. So we had the old computers with Microsoft Paint, and we'd draw like these little abstract paintings on Microsoft Paint, and we put them on the little floppy disks and trade them back and forth. Like, oh, what is it? You tell me what I drew. Little weird stuff like that. And I ended up on Microsoft Paint one time drawing like meticulously copying the Far Side comics. Remember those, like the Gary Larson Far Side comics,
Right?
Like the caveman and stuff. So I'd go in there and like do like every like pixel by pixel, like drawing these Far Side comics. And what else would I do? Like my brothers would run for school officer or whatever, like student body office, and they're like, "Hey, can you draw my campaign poster?" So I do that. I draw to magazines, stuff like that. At one point, there was an Etch A Sketch in a dentist office. I think I was like, I don't know, 6 or 7. And I started messing with it, and I started drawing like these kitchen cabinets. And I was like, I wonder if I can do this. I wonder if I could draw a doorknob. And that was it, right? So, but anyway,
the doorknob,
like a doorknob on the door. So I like drew these cabinets. I'm like, I wonder if I can draw a doorknob on here. And that was when I was little. And then when I was like 14 or 15, so like 96, 97, someone gave me an Etch A Sketch for Christmas. And so I got it because I like drawing, whatever. So they gave me an Etch A Sketch for Christmas, and I started messing with it, and I drew this kind of jaggedy Christmas tree, and I'm like, ooh, I could draw the presents. And I drew the presents with like little bows on it, whatever. So I started kind of getting into it a little bit, and so I started taking that to school. So I was in high school by then. I was like in 9th or 10th grade, and I started drawing like Homer Simpson was the big one. I drew Homer Simpson, like the same picture of Homer Simpson, like I don't know how many times. I just draw him like every day, and so that's how I kind of got the muscle memory to turn the knobs. So most people have played with an Etch A Sketch, but in case you haven't or just played with a little bit, it's the way it works is there's 2 knobs, right? It's a box, and it's got this silver screen, and then when you move the left knob, it goes left and right, and if you move the right knob, the line will go up and down. And so to work both of them, to make diagonals and circles and stuff, you have to turn both knobs at the same time. So it takes a lot of practice to be able to draw anything besides like stairs. Yeah, so I started drawing Homer and just like little cartoon characters. And then and people liked it, so I just kind of show off, like, hey, look what I can draw. But it wasn't any big deal. And so come 2001, I was Mormon, so I went on my Mormon mission. And when I went there, I would draw like portraits of the other missionaries and like give them to them. I know it's kind of weird, but that's just what I did. So I drew portraits of people, kind of learning how to draw. Then I had my parents send me an Etch A Sketch just because I was bored sometimes. So they sent me one for Christmas. I was in Honduras. So they sent me an Etch A Sketch, and I showed somebody the Homer. I'm like, look, I can draw Homer on an Etch A Sketch. So they're like, oh, that's cool. And another guy's like, oh, you know what I saw on TV? I saw a lady that could draw Jay Leno. It was like Jay Leno with shading and everything. I'm like, what? I'm like, no way, you can't do portraits on an Etch A Sketch. And so I had my an ingrown toenail or something, and I was in bed. And there was a portrait of the Mormon prophet guy in front of him. Like, I wonder if I can draw that. So I kind of whipped it out. In an hour, I drew the portrait of this old guy. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I took a picture of it, and like in my letter home to my parents, I'm like, hey, I drew a portrait on an Etch A Sketch, and I erased it. It was cool. It was like, it took me like an hour. And so from there, I was kind of like, I kind of got this bug, right? Like, I wonder what else I can draw on this. So I started doing more portraits and trying to, and then I was like, I wonder how I could preserve these things, right? Because with an Etch A Sketch, you shake it and it erases. So I'm like, I wonder if I can make these permanent. And I don't know how I figured this out, but what an Etch A Sketch is, I talked about the silver screen, right? So it's a glass screen, and it's coated in this like really fine aluminum powder. And when you turn the knobs, what happens is there's like this system of pulleys and wires, and then there's a needle that scratches the powder off. And then the black line you're seeing is the background, the inside of the box. And that's filled with aluminum powder and beads. And so when you shake it, it recoats the screen and erases the line. So I had to figure out a way to get the powder out of there. So when you shook it, nothing happened. So since I was in Honduras, I didn't have any technology or anything. So and I wasn't very technically inclined either. So I took like a candle, and that's all I had. I had a candle. I got appendicitis, and I was like out of work for a couple of weeks or whatever. And so I drew this picture of Jesus, and then I took a candle and tried to burn a hole through it to see if I could get the powder out. And that didn't work. Needless to say, that didn't work at all. So, I had my parents send me another one, and I decided I was going to do this, like recreate this, painting that someone did of Jesus, like kneeling down or something. And so I started, and it was really scribbly. Like I drew the nose, and the nose was too big. So I'm like, how am I going to erase that? So I kind of started drawing the whole background in like black, and I'm just kind of figuring out, and it came out actually pretty good. And I decided I wanted to give that to my mission president, who's like my boss, and so I got this knife, and I'm like, how do I cut this open? The candle doesn't work. So I got a knife, it was like a kitchen knife, and I had a little, like a camp stove in my apartment, and I heated the knife up and melted the plastic with the knife and cut the whole back off. And then I like put some construction paper on the back with hot glue. It was like really primitive, crafty stuff. And anyway, that ended up lasting he had it hanging in his house for like 13 years or something.
Wow. Wait, so does that ruin the Etch A Sketch though?
Well, you can't use it anymore, but the picture stays there. So it becomes like this kind of permanent work of art.
Right.
So let's see. Anyway, so that was in 2001. I went on my mission, came home in 2003. And then I just kind of kept at it. Like I'd go buy Etch A Sketches at the store and kind of show people like, hey, look what I can do. And it was kind of this like show off type thing. But it was still, I wanted to learn how to draw well on it, right? So there's this one girl I like one time, she's like, it was going to be her birthday. I'm like, oh, what do you want for your birthday? And she's like, oh, you should draw me something on the Etch A Sketch. I'm like, okay, like thinking I'm going to draw something small. And I ended up sitting there like all night drawing this picture of Joseph Smith, who's like the Mormon, like the big Mormon prophet. And it took me like 8 hours, and it was kind of scribbly, but I never seen anything like it before. And she like, I gave it to her, and her jaw like literally dropped. She was like, oh, I didn't think you were going to do anything like this. This is amazing. And so that kind of reaction kind of kept me going. And then I met my wife, and so she was my girlfriend. I'd make her drawings and give them to her as like little presents or whatever. Anyway, so is I started like researching all this stuff on the internet. I'd go to the library and like look all like see if there were any, because I know there was one artist that could draw Jay Leno, right? So I started looking up on the internet, seeing if I could find any others. So I found one artist. She had a little web page, and I emailed her, and she's like, "Oh, you know what? You know how you?" I'm like, "Do you know how to make these permanent?" Because by that time I was using like a soldering iron to cut the thing open. And she's like, "Oh, you can drill holes in it and then empty it out." I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." So I started doing that, made it easier, and I kind of became this sort of mad scientist, trying to figure out how to make these permanent. And I mean, this wasn't anything I did. I wasn't like obsessed with it. Just like every once in a while, I'd go on the Etch A Sketch and draw something. She ended up hooking me up with the owner of Ohio Art, who made the Etch A Sketches, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we'll sponsor you. Give us a bio." And I was all excited, so I took all this time making a bio for him so I could put it on the website. And I called him back, and he's like, "Wait, who are you?" I'm like, "What do you mean? We just talked like a couple months ago." He's like, "I don't know who you are." He's like, "Whatever." So he just kind of brushed me off. And the good thing with working with him though is I ended up getting these kits. So they'd send me these unassembled Etch A Sketches, right? So it'd just like have the frame and all the pieces, but you'd have to coat the screen yourself. But it made it a lot easier to make them permanent. So I started using those, and these were like totally, totally permanent. Like you could shake them and throw them, and nothing would happen to them. And I found these other artists, like there's one guy, George Vlasic, and I'm looking at him, and he's been doing this for years, right? He does these amazing portraits of, he did like sports stars and presidents, and he ended up going to the White House and like being on Oprah and all this stuff. And so I'm like, that's amazing. There's no way I could ever be like that guy, right? So this is kind of like this unattainable goal, but I wanted my goal was to be like as good as this guy, right? So I made a web page. I started asking other like meeting up more and more Etch A Sketch artists. Like, so I found out there's like community of people. And we kind of started forming this community. I was doing more gifts for people. I started kind of reaching out and doing commissions. So I'd like charge someone like $75 to draw their wedding picture or something like that. And they didn't come out, they did come out that great sometimes. Like this,
Right.
like I did one, and the guy's like, "Why does my wife look like a monkey?"
No,
And I'm like,
because it's an Etch A Sketch,
"It's an
brother.
Etch A Sketch, man. Like, what do you expect? Like, it's one line, right? Like, I can't like draw her mouth. And they're like, here, draw this picture on an Etch A Sketch." I'm like, "Okay, I'll try it." And it was only like, it wasn't much I charged him, so I'm like, you can't complain about it. He didn't charge you like a bunch of money, but it was still kind of discouraging, right? But I'll try it. Like, how do I draw a face with one line? Anyway, and then I started kind of like from there's like doing little portraits and stuff. I started venturing into kind of bigger subjects. So I started drawing buildings and like these like Mormon temples with like trees and stuff. And I started getting actually like really good at it. And I was able to draw these portraits that like actually look like the portrait. And so that was the really encouraging thing, is that like I was impressing myself. Like the reaction of other people was cool, but to me, my favorite part was like I draw him like, holy crap, how did I do that? You know, is
Right.
that feeling of impressing yourself? So anyway, so like I said, Etch A Sketch was just kind of something I did on and off. I was still drawing with other mediums, so pencils, I draw with pencils and try to figure that out still, and trying to learn how to draw with charcoal. So I'd go to the library and check out like videos on how to draw, like live figure drawing with charcoal. And did I say, yeah, so we moved to Vegas. I got a job as a painter, just like painting buildings with my uncle. And that was a job that I really liked. Like, I love that job because I could use my hands and make something that I could show other people that I did. So those kind of like, for whatever reason, I like doing that, making something, showing something. They're like, "Oh, cool." Or even if they aren't really impressed, like I'm impressed with it. So, I painted for a couple years. I was in college to do who knows what. Like I was just in there taking classes because I was supposed to. And then in like 2006, I signed up for Art 101, and my teacher was this guy named Mike Ogilvy, and he was like, to me, like I'd see his artwork, and he was this comic book artist, and he was just amazing, right? I was just blown away by this guy. So he gained my respect. But on the first day of class, he's like, "Okay, we're gonna do these things called blind contours." And I'm like, "Oh, I did those on that library DVD I checked out." So we'd look at our hand. So we had to look at our hand and then just draw on the paper without looking at the paper. So we just keep looking at your hand and draw your hand. And so within like 30 seconds, he's like, "Are you an art major?" And I'm like, "No, why would I be an art major? Are you crazy?" Like that didn't seem like anything. That didn't seem to me like, I don't know if it's something my dad told me. Like I was never discouraged, but it was like, I'm from a small town, right? So I didn't know any artists or anybody that did that for a living. Um, So yeah, it was just something that you could do on the side. So that was my plan. I'm like, oh, this
Right.
is something I can do on the side. Like, I love it, but I've got a job as a painter, and I'm making like enough money to survive. So why would I want to go into art? Even though I hadn't picked a major, I was still like anything but art. But Mike was extremely encouraging. He was like, I'd show him the other artists. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty good, but look at this guy. I'd show him George Vlasic, and he's like, I don't understand. He's like, what's he doing that you couldn't do? I'm like, you think I could draw like that? He's like, you are drawing like that. And so that just kind of like a light clicked on, right? And so he showed my work to the lady who does the galleries. She's in charge of the galleries at the city. Her name's Jeannie, and she emailed me. She's like, hey, Mike showed me your work, and it's really beautiful. I'm like, oh, thanks. Not thinking anything of it, but it just kind of kept me going for a while. I just spent several years making art for other people, and this was kind of like my practice, right? So you get it takes a lot of practice to get good at the Etch A Sketch, obviously. So I just practice by giving art to people, and I just like the reaction. They're just like, oh, cool, thanks, and they'd hang it up in their house, or they just have it there, and the reaction kind of varied. Sometimes people are like, oh, cool, thanks, and it end up at the bottom of some pile. But I decided, you know what, I'm gonna do this piece for myself. Like, I want, like, all these people are doing different stuff, the Etch A Sketch, but I want to see if I can get into a gallery. Like, that just became my goal. And I don't know, I hadn't even really been to art galleries that much just because I hadn't been around them. But for some reason, I was just like, I want to get in the gallery, so I'm going to build this body of work. I didn't have any specific goals, right? I wasn't like, oh, within 2 years, I want to have enough pieces to get into a gallery. I was just like, one day I want to have my art in a gallery. But anyway, kind of life started happening. So 2009, 2010 is when everything kind of took a shit, right, in Vegas, because I had gotten a job as a carpenter, so I'm in the carpenters union. I like that actually better than painting. It was like, I'm on the strip and I'm building these like $10 million staircases or whatever, and I could take people down and say, look, I installed that, or I made that, and
Right.
it was just kind of this source of like self pride. But then 2010, I like lost my job. We lost 2 houses. We had foster kids. We lost the foster kids. It was just like this. My life started really just falling apart. And so that light I had, where I was just kind of etch sketching every once in a while, like the piece I was working on, they just like went up into the closet, and just kind of the light went out, right? So,
Right.
so I mean, I got into a really dark place. I was out of work for 2.5 years. I was back in school to be a teacher, which is something I thought I really wanted to do. And I wasn't making any art at all. Like, I wasn't doing anything creative. I was just, by this time we had 2 biological kids, and they were taking up all my time. My wife was working, she was pregnant, and I was like back in school doing everything, like putting everything I had into school. Like, I'm like spending like 16 hours to write an essay. I'm like, I'm going to be the best teacher ever. Like, every ounce of energy I had was going into school and my kids, and I just kind of forgot about the art. But it got to a point where I needed therapy. Like, I needed to talk to somebody, because I mean, being out of work and all that, with no real prospects of, I don't know, whatever it was, I was just feeling awful. So I went to go talk to this therapist, and she was like, what do you do that makes you feel better? Like, what kind of things do you need to do to feel normal? I'm like, well, I got to make sure I eat, and I got to make sure I shower, and I got to make sure I get enough sleep, and I got to make sure I'm like creating something. She's like, well, why aren't you doing that? I'm like, I don't know, I don't have time. But anyway, so that kind of kicked me kind of back. So I'm like, I'm going to finish these pieces. And I started kind of sputtering. Like I said, so the encouraging things to me were other people's reactions, and then my own reaction to the work. But there was one time, another discouraging thing that had happened is, there was an art contest, and this was stupid. It's stupid looking back on it, but at the time it was like a big deal. There was this art contest that Red Robin, the hamburger place, they were like, we're going to have an Etch A Sketch contest.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I was on Flickr with a couple other artists, and they're like, hey, check it out. There's an Etch A Sketch art contest, and the winner gets a $50 gift certificate. I'm like, oh, this will be cake. Like, no problem. Like, nobody can Etch A Sketch like me, right? So this was like in 2010, and I drew this veggie burger, and my wife's like, why are you so confident? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, what if you lose? I'm like, why would you say that? Like, why would you even say that to me, right? Like, what do you mean, what if I lose? But I mean, she was trying to keep me grounded because I was kind of high flying and getting really cocky. And she was, I mean, really, she was just trying to prepare me for if I lost. And then like, I'm like waiting and waiting and clicking on the thing and I didn't win. I'm like, how is this possible? How did I lose? And I was like, I was devastated. It was just a stupid contest, but I'm like looking, I'm like, what are the criteria for judging? Was like the photo and the quality, and it has to be a Red Robin burger. I'm like looking, I'm like, why didn't I win? And that was like a huge downer for me. So that was like one of the reasons I kind of put it down for a while. It just kind of, you expect things to go a certain way and then they don't. And so
it was probably rigged.
Well, I don't think it was rigged. We were actually talking. It's funny because we were talking. There's a Facebook group now of like 70 of us, and we were talking and we got in this big discussion about it. And the only thing we could think of is that I didn't hit submit or something like that. But it's just funny how something so trivial that really should have even, I don't even know if you could have called it a speed bump, right? It was this $50 contest, like it was nothing. But to me, it became such a big deal that I let it kind of just, like that passion I had just like sputtered out because of it, you know?
And what's the lesson there? Like to not like care as much about the little things, or like to not have that expectation, like, or like to kind of ground yourself like your wife was trying to do.
Right. I think thinking about it, I mean, there's been a lot of expectations on the way. Like as an artist, you, or at least me, like I daydream a lot. And so I imagine how these things are going to come out, and I get these kind of grandiose ideas like, oh, I'm going to win this contest, and then I'm going to be on the internet and I'm going to be famous, or people are going to see this and they're going to be like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm going to be like, I'm going to get phone calls from Letterman like this other guy did, and then that stuff doesn't happen. It was something I learned in therapy that when you build up expectations and they don't happen, like, how do you cope with that? It's about accepting what happens rather than just expecting it and it has to go my way or else it's not worth it. Right. And so there's that inner critic saying, see, this isn't, and it starts getting to you like, where's your focus? Are you focusing on the negative, or are you focusing on what could possibly happen? Like if things don't go your way, are you just going to just start getting down on yourself and tearing yourself down and be your own, like kind of being your own stumbling block? Like you can sit there and dwell and you start circling on these thoughts like, oh, well, I guess I'm not as good as I thought I was, or you know what, this isn't really worth my time, and those thoughts kind of consume you. So back to your question, it's just, I think you just have to accept the results. Like you can control what you can control. Like I'm like, personally, I like to put like 180% or into what I'm doing. So if I'm going to put 180% into this drawing, that's all I can control. Like I can't control if the people at Red Robin who know nothing about art, like make me a winner. Like I can't control that. So that kind of, I mean, more recently has been what gets me through anything. Because at this point, I'm going to do my best, and whatever other people think of it or whatever external stuff happens, I'm just going to keep doing my best. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. You can put all that effort into what you do, into like what you can control, and it is good to have those expectations, those kind of grandiose ideas like you were talking about, but not like banking on them, you know, like, and handling Plan B, okay, whenever like Plan A doesn't go right.
Yeah. So speaking of that, so I've got this idea that I'm going to be in a gallery, right?
Right.
Kind of getting back to the story, like how this all panned out. Like I got my job as I'm a maintenance carpenter on the Strip, so finally I'm starting to get out of this dark place that I was in, right? I got my dream job. Like I'm like, if I can get a job on the Strip as a carpenter in a casino, then I don't have to be a teacher, which I would have loved, but it also would have been extremely stressful. Then I can drop out of school, I can be a carpenter, because that's like a retirement job. Like the job I got is a job you can retire on. You got pension, you got healthcare, it's like the perfect job, right? And at this point, like the art wasn't even like it, I hate to say it, but art was something that it became something that I used to do, right? So by like 2011, right. I'm like, oh yeah, I used to do this, and I kind of show people every once in a while, like at work. I'm like, oh, have I ever shown you this? They're like, no. They're like, why don't you do that anymore? I'm like, I don't know, I used to do it. I don't really do it anymore, and I'm kind of ashamed of that now. Like how did I get to that point to where I stopped for so long that I used to draw on an Etch A Sketch, that I used to do this. Like I had these big goals and I just dropped them. And I started looking at how that happened. I started talking. I found the Facebook group that I told you about, and I was just kind of like, well, maybe I could try it again. But over that whole time, the shame came from wanting to do it and then not doing it. Like, I don't have the time to do it. Like, I have to have, nobody can be around, because if this table gets bumped, then the whole thing's ruined. Or I got kids in here, I can't focus with all this noise. And I've always got
Yeah.
kids around, right? Like, I've got 3 little kids now. So how am I supposed to etch a sketch with 3 little kids running around? It's impossible. So months would go by, and then that turned into years. And it was just this huge gap to where, like I said, I used to be an artist, right? And so a few years ago, I found this Facebook group, and there's these artists that I used to talk to. I'm like, hey, how you doing? They're like, great. How are you doing? It's like, oh, and I see that they've got Etsy and they're selling stuff. Like, they're like actually making a living as Etch A Sketch artists. And I look at their work, and they're doing all these contests and this kind of stuff that I was missing out on that I used to love. And so I'm like, how do I get back into this? And then kind of a random thing. I've got a Vespa that, like, I love my Vespa, and it's like the thing that I'm like into. And I was on this forum, and there was a thread on there. It was called Let's Draw Scooters. And I'm like looking on there and seeing all these people's like scooter art. I'm like, so I just went on there and I said, I'm going to draw my scooter on an Etch A Sketch. And they're like, oh, that'll be cool. We'll wait for it. We're excited. So that was an accountability that I had, right? And I'm like, I'm
Right.
not going to do the scooter just yet. Here's what I have to do. So I had 2 pieces that I had started like in 2010, 2011. I started one of the Utah State Capitol, because my dad was like, hey, can you draw the Capitol for your mom? Like, because they were tour guides there. I'm like, sure. And I drew the dome, and then I stopped. And I started drawing one. I'm like, I'm going to do a gallery piece. It was this little restaurant in Hawaii that I love. And it's just like this little serene scene with palm trees and this restaurant. And I started that, and I cracked the glass. When I tried to clamp it down, I cracked the glass. I started over, but I didn't. But that was at the point where I was just kind of giving up. So those Etch A Sketches sat up on the shelf for like 5 years.
And they were literally like in progress,
They were
like,
literally in progress. Yeah.
and like, so you just like can't touch them as they're like sitting there. Like, how do you like preserve it at that point?
So like I said, the powder, when there's powder in there, it erases it. So these I talked about the kits that Ohio Art would send me.
Uh-huh.
And these kits, it's funny if you watch Elf, you know how whatever
Yeah.
his Will Ferrell's an
You
Etch
could
A
do it in
Sketch
like
art,
2
you can do it
seconds.
in like 2 seconds, right? And so that's all fake. That's all fake stuff. But at one point they're making the Etch A Sketches, and I saw this like a year ago. I'm like, whoa, those are the kits. Like, they got those from Ohio Arts. I have those in my closet. So these kits, I coat the screen, and then I leave the powder out of them. So everything I do is one shot. People are like, well, what do you do if you mess up? Well, I can't mess up. Like, I don't mess up, because I go so slow, and I'm so focused when I do it that everything I do is one shot, right? Like, there's ways I can manipulate the powder and stuff like that to kind of cover up mistakes, but it's one shot. So there's no powder in there to erase it, so I don't erase it. So it's sitting up there, and I've moved a couple times, and they were fine. They were just sitting there with kind of like the outline of the building, and halfway finished for 5 years. So
Gotcha.
to get more, so I kind of intentionally started getting accountability from other people. So I would post the pictures. I had those 2 Etch A Sketches. I'm like, I'm gonna finish these first. It's gonna take me a while. Like, these take months to finish anyway, with the kids and stuff. I'm like, it'll take me a while. I'm gonna do these first, and then I'm like, but I have to practice, because I'd been off the knobs for like 5 years. So I asked my kids. I said, Marley, my oldest, I said, what do you want me to draw on the Etch A Sketch? She's like, I want Frozen. I want Elsa and Anna. This is when Frozen was big. I'm like, okay. So I have to go through, and I said, you know what? I got to a point where I was like, it's now or never. Like, I'm 34 years old. And if I don't do this now, if I don't start working to reach this goal of getting in a gallery now, I'll never get there. Like, another 5 years will pass, and I wouldn't even notice, right? And then it'll become something that I used to do that I can't do anymore, right? So I started practicing. So I drew Elsa and Anna, and it came out really good. But I was like, I'd get up every morning. I said, I have to get up every single morning. I have to. And it's weird, because in the times when I was out of work and I could have actually done it, it were the times I didn't do it. But then when my life was so crazy, like, my wife and I were like literally tag teaming. She'd come back from work, tag team. I got the kids, right? And then I'm running this 2,000 room remodel of it, at the casino I work at, and I'm getting screamed at every day by my boss. And we're on this insane schedule where like that they had no intention of actually completing it. We're getting things done on this schedule, and I'm like exhausted. But I'm like, you know what? It doesn't matter. Like, I can make up any excuse in the world. I could say I can't do it with the kids around. I can do it I can't do it because I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I need to sleep. But instead, what I decided to do was get up early. Like, I know they talk about it on your podcast a lot. Like a bunch of different people talk about getting up early. So I'd get up at like 4 a.m. before the kids would even think of getting up. And what image am I going to draw? I'm going to do the best Elsa. I'm never going to be able to sell it because it's like I don't know if Disney would come after me, whatever, but I'm just going to do this for my daughter. It's going to be the best thing I can do. And so I spent a couple months like drawing this Elsa on. It came out great. I was happy with it. And then I'm like, Drake, what do you want me to draw on the Etch A Sketch? He was like 3. He's like, Sven, draw Sven. I'm like, from Frozen. I'm like, I'm not going to draw Sven. I'm going to draw Olaf, right?
I'm done with Frozen.
No, but I didn't. I drew Olaf.
Oh, Olaf. Okay, all right.
Olaf, right? But I was very particular about what I was drawing, so I used Elsa and Anna was a line drawing, and so the hardest thing about Etch A Sketch is getting a smooth curve. So I had to be able to get a smooth curve again, right? So I had to get my kind of brush the dust off, and I was a little rusty, so I had to practice. So that was all about practicing getting the long smooth curves back. And then with Olaf, I'm like, I started figuring how to do shading and kind of like these. So I started working on value scales and getting different values and drawing, like he had like a grass skirt and a coconut, like a coconut bra and stuff. So I'm like, I'm going to use this to practice texture, right? So I did the grass skirt and I drew a coconut, and so I was working on texture. So I started getting back into like the technical aspect, and I was so happy. Like I was just like, it was like coming home, Yeah, I finished those 2, and then I drew the Capitol, and I'm like, how in the world did I do that? Right? Like if you look at, you've seen the drawings, right?
Yeah.
So the Capitol, I'm like, I don't know how I did this. I'd sit there every day for like 5 minutes. And like I said, with the kids running around, I had these excuses. I'm like, screw it. I'm drawing this with the kids around. So my 3 kids would be on the couch watching America's Funniest Home Videos and like busting up laughing. And I'd be sitting there in front of the reference photo, like Etch A Sketching. I'm like, I'm putting in 20 minutes today. I'm getting it done. I'm like, don't touch the table, please, but I'm going to do this.
Right.
So after 2 months, I mean, if you think about it, if you're moving towards where you want to go, eventually you're going to get there. Time flies when you're doing nothing, young man. I'm telling you, like,
yeah.
like I could have sat there and watched America's Funniest Home Videos, right? I could have sat there with my, and it wouldn't have been a waste of time. Like my life would have been okay. Like if I never picked up an Etch A Sketch again or a pencil again, my life would have been totally fine, right? But inside, like I had that to where I had to create. There's this talk, and it's kind of depressing. I don't recommend everybody listen to it, but it's by Jordan Peterson, and I think it's called The Curse of Creativity or something. And he talked about how difficult it is to monetize creativity. That very few people are creative, but if you are a creative person and you have that drive to do it, if you don't create, you'll literally just die. Like you have that in you. It's this drive that kind of keeps you alive.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson speaks the truth, but it can be depressing sometimes.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely the truth. He's like, it's impossible to monetize. Like he went through like specifically like you have to get a job. Like to be an artist, you have to get a job. Like you have to do it on the side and get the money flowing to where you can survive. Because as an artist, the chance of it's like trying to be, like I look at it like the kids who say, I want to be a baseball player. Like whatever, you're ridiculous. You're not going to make any money being a baseball player. Right. But as an artist, if you like, I literally felt like if I wasn't creating, I couldn't be happy. Right. So once I picked up, this is about 2 years ago, I was on the Facebook group constantly talking to these other artists. I started an Instagram, and I'm like, I didn't know what Instagram was. Like I had never touched it, but everybody had Instagram. So I started an Instagram account, and I immediately started getting not a lot of followers. Like I still don't have a lot of followers, but I started getting these people that I just respected, like these amazing artists like Ashley Oubre, who is just this artist I found on Instagram, and she's in like the Figure of Drawing Handbook, and she's this huge, amazing hyper realist that I just totally respect. And she's like, how do you do that? I'm like, I can't believe you like my work. like it's incredible, So that was a big driver.
Yeah.
And then there was another food artist. He was a food artist. He won like second place in Britain's Got Talent. He did art with food, and his name is Nathan Wyburn. And he started following me. I'm like, hey, I can't believe you're following me. This is amazing. And so I'm watching these people's accounts and watching these other artists and how they do it. And so watching on Instagram and seeing other people's art to me was like a big driver, right? I'm like, look what I made, and I'm looking at what you made. And I'm commenting on other people's work, and it just became the Instagram thing for whatever reason just became to me what was like the biggest driver for me of making art. Like, I'm posting my progress on Instagram, and I'm going to show people how I preserve it. And I'm going to get like better photos of my work, and I'm going to show everybody everything I've done. And because people start commenting, and that became a driver too. But I also, like I said, the only thing I was trying to do was get into a gallery. So I started just kind of casting down roots. If a plant grows really fast, it's not going to be strong, right? But you think of like a huge tree, like it's got these roots that are just deep in the ground, and it's like impossible to tear out. So I started just putting these roots down. I started building an Instagram, and like I said, I wasn't getting a lot of followers. Like, I'd see these people with like hundreds of thousands of followers, and I'm like, I just said, you know what? I don't care. I don't care how many followers other people get. I don't care how many followers I get. I'm just going to start building a brand for myself. Building an Instagram. I'm like, I'm going to build my Facebook. I had a web page before, but it didn't really get any hits, so I just deleted it. I'm like, I don't have the money for a web page when I stopped, when I stopped doing it before. I'm like, I don't have money to keep a web page, so I got rid of my old web page. So at this point, I got a hold of the company that did my web page before. I'm like, I want to restart my web page. They're like, no problem. Here's your web page. So I started my web page back up, updated it. I forgot to mention this earlier, but back in the day in like 2010, 2011, I had done this commission for a person that my wife worked with. And they're like, hey, can you draw me the Sheraton Hotel? And I want the Sheraton Hotel in Waikiki with Diamond Head behind it, right? The mountain on Honolulu. And I ended up spending like 20 hours on this piece. And it was like I said, like 180% I'm going to throw into it. So I took it to this gallery because I was looking for someone that could take pictures of it and do prints. I'm like, I wonder if they can do prints on an Etch A Sketch. So I took it to this gallery, and the technology was okay, but not great. So they did these G-clay prints, and I tried to stick it inside of a frame. And it was like, okay, but we had the photos. She was like, oh, you can be in my gallery. It only costs you $2,500. I'm like, I don't have $2,500 to be in a gallery. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So whatever, cast her aside. But then fast forward to like a year and a half ago, I found this guy that could like reproduce my Etch A Sketches.
What do you mean?
Okay, so I'm looking for art reproduction companies in Vegas, right? And there's only one that I can find. And it's got this advertisement for this process called Lumichrome HD. I'm like, what the hell is Lumichrome HD? So I look into it, and they have, if you look, like in Vegas, they're all over the place. There are these galleries with giant, like 8-foot long portraits, and they're on acrylic. And so they're called acrylic face mounted prints. So they printed out, he took a picture of it. He's like this master photographer. He's like an amazing photographer. He photographs my work and with like, however, like this amazing camera, and then prints it out in like these metallic inks, and then sticks it, he glues it to the back of a piece of acrylic. And then I take that piece of acrylic and stick it inside an Etch A Sketch frame, and it is identical to the original.
Cool.
Right. So that was like a huge step. I'm like, this is like, I could sell limited editions, right? This is like what you have to do in a gallery. You have to have the originals. You have to have limited editions. I'm like getting set. I don't have very many pieces yet, but I'm like ready. I'm like on my way to being in a gallery. Don't know what gallery, but then that Nathan Wyburn that I talked about was in Vegas, and he posted this picture of him at this grand opening of a gallery in Caesar's Palace in the Forum Shops called Sky Art Gallery, Sky with an E. And I'm like, what is this? So I went down there. I'm like, this is the most amazing gallery I've ever seen. It's like pop art, but it's fine pop art. There's like portraits done in Swarovski crystals and just these huge, amazing, just kind of pop art paintings. I'm like, I want to be in Sky Gallery, right? Don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to be there. So that became like an actual goal. Didn't know when. That became an actual goal of mine. So I started applying it. I said, I'll start locally. So Mike Ogilvy, my art teacher I talked about, he contacted me. He's like, hey, you want to be part of this this board? It's called the Metro Arts Council. We promote public art. We want more tourists to come and enjoy the art we have in Vegas, because we have kind of a fledgling scene. And I'm like, sure. So they started being in there. I started hooking up with more local artists. And there was like a little community center that has a gallery. I'm like, I want to do a show there. He's like, please do a show. People would love it. So I applied for it. And I'm like, waiting to do the show. Another guy on the board, he runs the galleries in the libraries around town. We have these amazing art galleries in all our libraries. And he's like, can you do a show in the library galleries? I'm like, yes. So that was my goal. I'm gonna get a show together for the community center and for the libraries, and we'll go from there, right? So as I'm preparing that, I get a message on my from my webpage. It says someone sent you a message from your webpage. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Nobody's ever done that. And it was a gallery. It was a guy that runs a gallery in Caesar's Palace. He's like, hey, I saw your work. I really liked it. Would you be interested in representation? I'm like, yes, I would. Right? Like, of course I would. Like, that's crazy. This is like my goal. It wasn't a gallery I was looking for, but still, it's like this high-end gallery in Caesar's Palace. And it's just like, my dreams are coming true right now. Right? And he said, I'll put it up for a couple of weeks. Well, 3 months went by and it's still in the gallery. Right? And then one day he calls me. He's like, come pick up your stuff. I can't sell this. He was like, kind of like upset. He's like, I can't sell this. I'm like, so again, like, I think going through what I went through before with like being down, you know, like getting knocked down and getting back up again. I know it sounds like cliche, but it just makes you stronger. Right? So it didn't faze me. Yeah. Like, it did a little bit where I was kind of like, you know, I don't know where I'm going to go from here. I'm going to do my gallery shows, get the public. I'm going to take a couple years and get some kind of notoriety and just start selling my work. Maybe I'll contact a few galleries. But as I'm walking out of these pieces at Caesar's Palace, I'm like, I put him in my car. I said, I'm going to run up to Sky real quick just to check it out because I love the gallery. I go up there and Vanessa's sitting there. This was like last week. Okay. And Vanessa, the owner's sitting there. I'm like, she's like, hey, what do you think of this art? I'm like, oh, it's great. And I'm like, I've been here quite a few times. And, you know, I'm like, I do like, I love this artwork. I'm like, I do Etch A Sketch artwork. She's like, I've seen some of that. I'm like, oh, I wonder if it was mine. I'm like, oh yeah, I've done some palm trees. I'm like, I have it in the car. You want to see it? And she's like, I'm like, do you have time? Like, I know I don't want to be like imposing because I didn't want to just like run up there and be like, look at my art and just be annoying, right? So she's like, yeah, bring it up. I have some time. So I run down to my car and I get a couple of pieces. I bring them up and she was just blown away. She was like, I've never seen like this before. She's like, listen, I want to work with you. And so she took me out in the hallway. She's like explained a couple of the ins and outs of it. And we sat down for like 2 hours and she wrote out this like 5-year plan. She's like, I want to work with you. And so I just like, you know, I couldn't cry there, but I left and I was just like crying in the car. Right. This is after you contacted me. Right. So this is like the last week of my life. And so I'm like, she's like, I want all your originals. I want to sell them. I'm going to get this on social media. We're going to get a show together. We're going to, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was just like exactly opposite of the last gallery I was in downstairs. Right. So I come out of this gallery that just kind of put me down, didn't want anything to do with me, said, I can't sell this. And I marched my ass upstairs, walked in there and just like threw myself out there. Right. I had to go against these voices that were saying, if you do this, this might mess it up. Right. You don't want to be too pushy because you could screw it up and you'll never get in there. Right. But I don't know. I just like, I went home and I was just like crying. I'm like, my wife's going to scream. Like, this is like my goal. Right. So anyway, yeah, I signed yesterday and I'm in Sky Art Gallery. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Congratulations, man. Like, that's such a triumphant end to the story. And so often in the show, like the worst moments lead to like the best moments, and it's great that you built up resiliency so you could get right back up again, like, as opposed to having like a huge long gap. Like, it's so important to remember that like the bad moments can lead directly into a good moment if you kind of get your mindset right and try to like see like how you can flip it, see how you can get back on your feet, see what other kind of opportunities there are for you to go for.
Right. It was just, yeah. I mean, really, I'm just like, I'm still kind of trying to recover. Like, I was down at the gallery yesterday and she's like, and some people were in there and she's like, they were like, what is this? Like, I've never seen this before. They're like, is this real? She's like, yeah, and there's the artist right there. And so I started talking to him and she's like, I need you to come in and I want you to, like, on the Saturday nights, just come in and draw outside there, you know, just work on your Etch A Sketches. And as people come by, just be like, yeah, my art's in there. Right. And so for years, like, my big daydream has been to be like somewhere on the strip, just like Etch A Sketching live. Like, this is like I got no other goals. like now this is the time where I just like run with this. I don't know what's going to come of it. Right. Like, I'm on a 3-month consignment agreement now, but this is like a long-term thing I'm in. So I've reached all my goals, like, and now it's just to ride this wave, you know?
Absolutely, man. Dude, that's so exciting. And you got to set up like a border so nobody bumps into you when you're doing it outside.
Back up. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, stanchions. Set up some stanchions. Like, don't touch this.
That's awesome.
But yeah, anyway, yeah.
Dude, This has been awesome to hear this story, and I'm so happy to like have you on like at this like triumphant moment, like, or this like moving into like even more triumphant moment. It's so fun to do, but it is time, as you know, for the final push. And this is where I ask you to kind of reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of somebody that you've really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Yeah, so I don't want to get too cheesy, but there were two things that my dad always told me growing up. He'd say, and it always bothered me, but he always say, attitude is everything. Anytime I started getting cranky or grumpy, he'd say, hey, attitude is everything. And that, for whatever reason, just stuck in my head, that no matter what you're doing, your attitude determines the results. You know, just throughout my whole story, that's what I've learned, that you can be negative about it, and you know, whether you're right, you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So fix your attitude. If you have a bad attitude, if you find yourself circling around to those thoughts that I can't do it, or nobody's going to like this, or that goal's too lofty, erase the thoughts. Like, I don't know what else to say. Erase those thoughts.
Shake that Etch A Sketch of those
Shake
thoughts.
that Etch A Sketch of your thoughts. Shake it and start over, right? So, you know, first of all, attitude. And then the second thing, and I hated it, I think that's why he did it, to kind of antagonize him. He'd say, stick to the task till it sticks to you. Beginners are many, finishers few. And it was just like, it stuck in my head, right? So that just kind of ended up being like this driving force in my mind, where I would start projects and stop them, and start them and stop them. But even though you stop something for a while, you got to go back and you got to finish it. Like, you got a goal, just push through. Like, there's going to be some major downs, most likely, and there's going to be some major ups, but just, you know, ride the roller coaster, ride it all the way through. I don't know what else to say. Just like, stick to it.
Dude, Dave, thank you so much for coming on the show today, for sharing your story, and you know, giving us that motivation to continue in our journeys.
Awesome. I appreciate it, young man.
And you can find Dave on his website, which is etchbeyond.com. And on Facebook and Instagram, he is Etch Beyond. Dave, thanks again, man.
Thank you, young man.
Boom. My thanks once again to Dave for coming on and sharing his story, his journey with us. I just love the idea of taking those excuses that you were telling yourself and just doing the thing anyway. Just realizing that they were really nothing but excuses and a way to let yourself off the hook. And Dave was able to do it despite the fact that he had kids, he had a job, a busy life, and he was out of practice. He had been far removed from his art for a long time, or off the knobs, as he put it. He just made the decision to put a little bit of time in every single day, all while that busy life that he was using as an excuse before was still going on around him. He was still living that busy life. He still had the kids running around, but he decided to just tell his kids, hey, don't bump into me. I'm still going to achieve my dreams. I'm still going to get this thing done. I'm still going to put the time in, and I'm still going to move forward. Those things that he was using as excuses before didn't just disappear. They were still very, very much still there. The only difference was his determination to do it anyway. So that is my challenge to you at the start of this new year. If you have those excuses that you still tell yourself, even if you are pursuing your own creative passions, even if you are actively going for it, getting things done, but you find that you have kind of fallen into a pattern and you have these other big goals that you want to achieve, stop using whatever excuses you are using to not do that thing. Live through those excuses. Bathe in those excuses and watch as those excuses are still a part of your life. They're still there, but you're doing the thing anyway. You will realize that you do have the time to do it. You do have the determination to do it. You do have the skills to do it, or you can gain those skills to do it. You just have to do it. I love Dave's realization that he was able to do it while his life was so busy, while he and his wife were tag teaming the kids and he barely had any time. Yet, when he did have a ton of time, when he didn't have anything going on, he wasn't able to do it. It's really all mindset. And especially going into this new year, change your mindset. Wake up early if you have to. Stay up late if you have to. Give stuff up if you have to. Just get those goals done. Even if you have to make some crazy proclamation to your friends and family or to yourself, like Dave was saying, accountability is a huge thing. Say the big project that you want to get done and then get it done by the end of this month. Like, as you know, I keep pushing this Cramuary project, but we are right now starting it. As you are listening to this, I am busily writing the Your Creative Push book. I set that goal for myself to write one book in 1 month, not a year, 1 month. I'm going to get it done. This is my accountability by telling you guys that I'm going to get it done. And you can achieve those things much faster than you think you can. So pick a Cramuary goal and just hit the ground running and tag your progress as hashtag Cramuary, either on Twitter or on Instagram or wherever you're at. Start telling your friends, start getting that accountability for the thing that you want to achieve. And you'll find that you can actually achieve it despite the excuses that you were using before. On our next episode, we have Virginie Ropars. Virginie is a sculptor of original mixed media sculptures, and you have to see these things to believe them. Incredibly unique and incredibly detailed. These things are beautiful, and I had a lot of fun talking with her about her creative process and some of the things that attempt to hold her back as she spends a lot of time making these gorgeous pieces. If you want to check out Virginie's work, you can head to virginieropars.com. That's VIRGINIEROPARS.com. Or on Instagram, she is Virginie_Ropars. And we'll have that all linked up in today's show notes page, as well as everything we talked about with Dave at yourcreativepush.com/272. But that is all I've got for you today. Hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope that you are all full of energy, full of motivation, ready to achieve all of your goals that you want to get done in 2018. The trick is to just get to them every day. If you need help, we will be here for you all year long to keep pushing you in the right direction to achieve your own creative dreams. I love you guys so much. Congratulations on a successful 2017, and I can't wait to see what you create in 2018. Bye, guys. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.